So, welcome everyone to this episode of our podcast. Today, I have Emma Benyon with me, and she is going to talk us through all things self care. But, Emma, tell us a little bit more about what it is that you do.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. So, I'm Emma. I'm a motherhood coach and self-care expert, and I'm just really passionate about helping mums and those who work with mums to take care of themselves, see and be able to have the value that self-care can ultimately bring to our lives so that we can better support ourselves, but also support those around us as well.
Absolutely. And why do you do this? Like, what brought you into it?
My own experience, I'm sure, as with many of us who do the things that we do, especially when it
Mm-hmm.
is something that is absolutely driven by our own passion and our own experiences, was ultimately my own experience after having my daughter. And even before that, in reality, when I look back, I wasn't taking care of myself. And that led me to a space where after she was born, I was really struggling with my mental health. I just wasn't taking care of myself, and I wasn't seeing the value in that and in ultimately how that practice of just caring for ourselves in a really supportive, nourishing way can ultimately help us to approach our day, approach our lives with so much more ease and more flow when we are absolutely 100% resourced.
And what was the turning point for you personally where you decided, I need to make some changes? Go into as much or as little detail as you like, but
Mm.
what brought you to that point?
The tipping point for me was definitely when I was diagnosed with postnatal depression. So my daughter was about 5 months old at that time. And I knew that there was something else, like, other than feeling in the way that I was feeling, that kind of black, fog. And, I had that diagnosis. And then from that point, I was like, actually, I do need to start taking better care of me, not just for her, but also for me. And so that was kind of the tipping point of actually, no, you do need to do something about it now. However, that all being said, um, being someone who likes to work a lot, there was those moments of absolute burnout as well, and not recognizing those signs of, just continuing to do, and actually not allowing myself to rest, or when I felt that I needed to rest, just pushing through it and trying to ignore actually what my body was telling me of, no, wait a minute, you do need to slow down and just stop. And then the knock-on effect of not doing that, ultimately is you then don't have a choice when you rest because you are so burnt out, exhausted, depleted. And so there's two things there really, but ultimately, I started those practices really simply, although, when we talk about self-care, there's so much connotation and stuff around that, isn't there? Before you can even get to that practice of actually caring for yourself, there's so many, oh, it should be this, it should be that, or this works for me, you
Mhm.
try it, it'll definitely work for you. And ultimately, there were so many things that were said to me, do this, do that, but actually that's great for you, and if it works for you, that's absolutely wonderful. However, where I'm at in my life right now, that's just not achievable. And so I began to build in those really kind of simple self-care practices, really strip it back to, just a couple of really simple things that would work, and then try and build on those as I've gone through that time. However, we know that life throws different things at us at different
Mhm.
times, doesn't it? Different contexts, and in this period and chapter I'm at now, again, I've stripped it right back and, and keeping it super, super simple. And in time, I'll build on that again if I choose to, or I might just choose to keep it super, super simple as it is right now. But I think those two things were definitely those kind of tipping points of, mental health is at rock bottom and something has to change. And
And
that burnout.
was this something that were you working in a similar space before, or what brought you to decide that this was something you were going to help other people with?
So I actually started my business, although under a completely different name, when my daughter was 4 weeks old, which in itself was that kind of self-care practice, I think, for me as well, because I had something to focus, something to drive. and keep me motivated, and was something outside, even though so intrinsically linked because I was designing products for mums and about motherhood. It was still separate, and it still gave me that kind of thing to go and do and to engage with.
Mm-hmm.
And then as that time went on, I've been doing the business now for about 6.5 years. And about 3 years ago, that kind of, it pivoted slightly, and it's pivoted so much more in the last kind of 12 months of, I went down the coaching route because I'd experienced coaching, I'd experienced, working with different coaching modalities for myself, since I started the business. And then actually I felt, I guess, a pull, or, however you want to describe it, actually, that this and how much of an impact it's had for me, I wanted to share that with others. And the coaching practice and the qualifications that then I've been doing for kind of the past 3 years really brought together the other side of things that I do. So as well as running my business, I'm also a full-time post-16 educator as well. And so the teaching and the coaching work so beautifully together. And the business is always focused on mums and helping mums to, celebrate those wins, celebrate, being a mum, but also really take value in supporting themselves and caring for themselves and acknowledging that they are somebody. They're not just somebody's mum, they are somebody themselves. And that, means that you can chase your dreams and you can, go after what you want. Might be a little bit slower, might take you a bit longer to get there, but that's still absolutely important that we do that. And as time, and as I've done the business, so much of it focused on self-care, underneath that kind of theme was always running through. And I think the perspective that I have on self-care is very, very different to what's been shared before, and actually coming at it from, let's just strip it back, let's just start simple, and then we can build on that if we choose to. But ultimately, it has to fit into however our life looks right now.
And tell me more about that, because you've mentioned it a couple of times about, when you were struggling a little bit and people were saying do this and do that. And, self-care, it's a big word, it's something that we hear a lot about. It's probably bandied about aimlessly, really. So what does it actually mean?
You're so right. It is so bandied about, isn't it? And I think we hear that kind of stereotypical, self-care, it's going to get your hair done, it's getting your nails done, it's getting this done, it's a spa day. And like, how many people just like shut off at that point? Like, I can't do that. That's not going to work for me. That's not my thing, or it's too expensive, or it's not accessible. And actually, although those things are wonderful, and for some people they are ultimately their self-care practice, and that is absolutely okay. For a lot of people, especially mums, those things are just not achievable in our day-to-day, weekly, monthly life, because there are so many other things pulling us in so many different directions, whether that is, our job, our career, our passion projects, whether that is the kids' activities or the kids' parties, whatever it is. There are so many different directions, so many balls that we are juggling all of the time, that anything then that is time for us or is something that we would like to do, it falls to the bottom of the list, because actually everybody else is perhaps more of a priority, or those things are more of a priority than we are. And so when we think about self-care, and bringing it in from that perspective, actually it feels completely unachievable if it's this like massive amount of time and it needs to be on our own and it has to be undisturbed and all of this stuff. And actually it doesn't have to be any of that. It can be whatever you need it to be. And whether that is, as simple as breathing for, and focusing on your breath, taking some deep breaths in and out for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, even just 30 seconds. If we can do that every day or a couple of times each day, like, the difference that is going to make is massive. And then the ripple effect that has, again, is massive. I think often when we think about the self-care, it's when we step into a new space, whether it's a new business or whether it's becoming a mom, what we did before that is often no longer achievable, or it needs to be changed to fit into where we are in that chapter of our life right now. And a lot of the clients I work with, reading was a big thing for them before they became parents. And ultimately, that just feels so, I just can't do it. Like, I just don't have the time, or when the kids are in bed, I'm just so exhausted and depleted. Actually, all I want to do is fall asleep, not sit and read a book. And then you add to that, well, before I had kids, I could read a chapter an evening, or I can read this amount, I could get through a book in a week or whatever. And so it can often feel, and there's so many barriers. This is just one example, but that actually, what's the point? If I'm not going to be able to read a chapter every night, then what is the point? And so it's about really stripping that back and looking at what is the value of doing that thing. And does that thing resource you? Does it fill up that energy fuel tank? Does it make you feel more like you? Are you better able to cope with those situations that life then throws at you? Whether it's your children, whether it's something at work, in your business, are you better able to cope with those things because you're coming at it from, someone who isn't exhausted and depleted completely, but someone who has some resource in that bank to actually be like, okay, I can operate from this space, rather than, maybe if we use an example of our kid maybe having a meltdown or them arguing or whatever, and maybe we come at it from a shouty, like, please stop what we come at it from that perspective, and ultimately we feel guilty afterward, don't we? Actually, if we come at it from a much calmer perspective, we are so much better able to navigate those situations. And so self-care doesn't have to be anything massive. It does definitely not have to be something that we do on our own. We can do it with our kids, our partner, our friends, our family around as well. It doesn't need to cost anything. And we just need to keep it super, super simple. And yet there is all that other stuff that we have to wade through before we even get to that point. But if we can come at it from a perspective of, I'm just going to do something for 5-10 minutes a day, every other day, whatever works for you, that is going to have such an impact.
Absolutely. And I think, you're a business owner, you're a mother, your business is helping other women or helping other families, just like what I do and what all of my listeners do. We give a lot of time to other people's families and to other people's well-being, that sometimes we can forget to do that for ourselves as well. Or we might feel guilty about giving it to someone else's family, but not giving it to our own family. So then we're focused on our own family, but we forget that we need something as well.
Absolutely. And we often do that, don't we? And even coming back to, how we talk to ourselves, for feeling guilty for, giving that, a service to, as such, somebody else, and not maybe reflecting it back on ourselves or to our family. And actually, there's all that negativity and stories and whatever that we're telling ourselves. And actually, one really simple thing that we can do is just to speak a little bit kinder to ourselves, as if we were talking to a friend, or maybe talking to a client or to our child. Actually, let's just come at it from that perspective. And, I'm sure that anyone who is listening, and I'm sure that, you've heard it as well, that kind of talk to yourself as if you were talking to your best friend. Like, what would your best friend be saying if you were absolutely exhausted, you are depleted, and maybe the energy isn't right, for whatever it is that you're doing right now in your business, when you're serving others? What is it that you actually need? And is it just an afternoon of doing nothing? Is it that this needs to become a priority for however long? And actually, even if we're pressing pause for an afternoon and we are just sitting in bed, or whatever it is, whatever that looks like, for you in how your life is set up, if just pressing that pause button for an afternoon means that you can go and do everything else better for that next week, imagine that ripple effect. Because if we're not showing up how we want to show up, then nothing else is going to operate from the place that it would normally do. And so I think that's a really useful kind of thing to focus on when we are, I'm absolutely exhausted, I need to do this, that, and the other. And actually, what is there that is an ultimate priority? And where can we add in that rest, whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, whatever that looks like.
I heard a concept of radical rest, of just, for me, it's about, it's okay to do nothing, like nothing. Because I'm one of those people that always has to be doing something.
Mm.
If I'm not doing something, I feel like I'm not doing
Mm-hmm.
something. So this idea of sometimes, and again, obviously, as you're saying, it depends on the person, that might not work for them. But the idea that it's okay to do nothing that has any production value
Mm-hmm.
whatsoever.
But isn't rest productive in itself?
Yes.
And it's a really interesting thing, isn't it? Because actually, and I was talking to a client about this last week, that actually we don't add value to rest.
Mm-hmm.
We don't add that to it. And actually, there is so much value in that, so much, that we get out of that. Perhaps it's because we don't have something to tick off our list, or that it isn't measurable in the same way as we've put all the washing away, or we've done this for our business, or we've whatever. Actually, add it to your to-do list if that helps you feel that it is measurable, or block out the time if that helps. Set a timer, whatever works for you, because there is value absolutely in sitting and doing nothing. That doesn't come with that it isn't hard, because it absolutely is. And it's a learned
It
it's a
definitely
learned
takes
behavior.
practice.
Absolutely. And I think when we come at it from a perspective of, like when we're doing qualifications to run our business, or, our kids are studying, we have to practice. Just because we are grown up, I put that in, inverted commas, because we are the grown up, doesn't mean that we get everything right all of the time, and that is okay. And it doesn't mean that we don't stop learning. We are learning all of the time. And rest is definitely a skill that a lot of us have to learn, because we live in a world that is go, 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 go all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
We are always contactable with, our laptop, our phone, etc. It's always there. There's always something for us to do. There's always going to be more for us to do. That list doesn't stop growing, does it? And so whatever is on that list, whether it's house, whether it's family, whether it's our business, whatever. And so we need to factor in that rest, because if we go back to what I said earlier, if we don't factor that time in, whatever that time looks like, then that forced rest is going to be, that's what's going to happen. And ultimately, we don't get to pick and choose that then. And often, especially for me, I know in my experience of getting to that point, it happens at the worst possible time. So it's about, if we're launching a product, or, we know that we've got a number of clients that we're working with, or we're launching a service or whatever it is, actually let's add rest into that as part of that.
I know something that I've had to do is, I would sometimes teach antenatal classes on the weekend,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to then say, if I'm teaching a class, I can't work the next day. I can't
Mm-hmm.
see clients the next day, because you are exhausted after
Mm-hmm.
that, like a full day kind of class. And I don't always get it right. Sometimes I forget to book that off my calendar. Someone books in, I have to go see them.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think working to how your brain works and how your life is set up is really important. So for me, it is scheduling. I need to schedule these things in. That's, if I don't do that, it's not going to happen. Other people might be more fluid, I suppose, and things. But one of the really important things that you were saying at the start, and you just kind of came back to there as well, is that we can, if we get to that point of burnout, we just can't work.
Mm-hmm.
But even kind of in the run up to that, in the type of works that we do, which is supporting other people, which is
Mm-hmm.
giving a lot of ourselves, a lot of our emotion, a lot of our mental energy to other people, if we don't keep our own mental energy high, if we don't look after ourselves in that way, our service delivery isn't going to be
Mm-hmm.
as good, and we can't, and it takes even more from us, because we will try really hard to make it as good. So we will give so much to other people, there'll be nothing left for us.
Absolutely. And I think when when we're working and we're getting, we can see the signs that we're getting to that point. I think it's really key that actually then we start to bring in more self-care practices to support ourselves, but maybe also, and this might be part of your self-care practice that you might want to bring in, is actually looking at what is there in your diary, in your week, whatever. Actually, what can you just press pause on or push back right
Mm-hmm.
now? just to give yourself that extra space, because ultimately, what is urgent for you to do at that time and what can wait till next week or the week after. And that is, such an act of kindness and compassion that we can give to ourselves. And whether that is, and I remember having a conversation with someone about this a couple of years ago, and they were like, we schedule time in for urgent stuff in our diary. Like, they don't actually put anything in it. They just schedule a block of time for things that's urgent. And if they use it, great. And if they don't, fine. It doesn't get used. And so, when we talk about scheduling, that can work really well, can't it? Actually, this is the block of time, especially if we are in a super busy period, and maybe we know from, how things have happened before and how we've maybe run those things before, or we've had that many clients before, that actually we need to add in that rest. We need to book that day off the following day, or we know actually that the morning or afternoon of whatever, actually, maybe I'm just going to be at home with the kids, or I'm just going to do this, or I'm just going to do that. It doesn't have to be sitting there doing nothing. It might be actually that there are some things that you need to do, but maybe they're not related to you giving yourself to others and supporting others. It's other things that maybe need to be done so that you can then work in that space and bring the energy to that. I think when we talk about all of this, what is absolutely key is to really look at how you work and what works best for you, and come at it from that space, because what works for me, what works for you, is going to be totally different, and that's okay. And so coming at it from that space means that you can find a way, and it might be trial and error, it might take practice, and it might take you setting boundaries, but ultimately, it's moving to that space, isn't it, where your business is working for you rather than the other way around, and that actually you are coming at it from a space of, lots of energy, lots of, I'm feeling really good about this, I'm really enjoying this, rather than I just need a break, I just need to press pause. Because when we're from that space, we definitely cannot support others to the best of our abilities.
Absolutely. And I think for a lot of people in doing what you do and doing what I do, we're trying to run businesses and essentially be full-time parents at the same time. So most of us are the primary caregiver for our children. And before we press record, at the time this is, you're on half term. So you were telling me how there hasn't been much done. So that can feel like a really, I definitely know I have, thankfully, I'm mostly better at it these days. And I know a lot of my clients would struggle with it as well. The being in our minds, the full-time carer, it's not always the reality. But having that responsibility for the children outside of school, or if they're not in school yet, plus trying to build a business and grow a business, and feeling, what's left. And circling back even to the idea of what is self-care, if someone's kind of saying, well, I don't know what I like to do, I don't know how to look after myself, have you any kind of different things? We mentioned breathing, we talked about kind of building in some rest time. Have you any other kind of practical tips for people?
Yeah, absolutely. The main thing, regardless of any of the other bits I'm going to share, is just to keep it simple. Do not add loads of pressure, loads of expectation to whatever it is that you try. Just keep it simple, because all of those super fancy bits, all those extra bits, can be added at a later date. It does not need to be anything more than something super simple. When I work with clients, the thing that I will often say is like, what did you enjoy before? So before you became a parent, before you started your business, what did that look like? And to make a list of those things, and then look at that from a different perspective of, well, what actually do I still want to do that actually might bring me joy and might resource that energy bank, but also what's achievable for me right now. And what's achievable for us right now might be different in 6 months, a year, 5 years time. So it's really important that we look at it from now. Often a lot of the things with the mums that I work with, the things that they absolutely, enjoy in terms of self-care practices, are reading. And we talked about reading earlier. and we might need to have a completely like reset and reframe on how reading might look. That might be that we read a page or a couple of pages a night. It might be that actually reading a book is really not achievable. However, we really enjoy being kind of absorbed in whatever it is that we're reading. So why don't we try listening to an audiobook instead? And that might be something that we can do, you know, if you're a parent who, like me, still has to sit on the landing while their kid falls asleep. Why don't, instead of us, you know, aimlessly scrolling social media or whatever else, let's just put our headphones in and listen to the audiobook while we wait for them to fall asleep. Podcasts, another really good one to add in as well. You know, whether you want to listen to them as you do the school run, or maybe on the way back, or even if, you know, if you are a parent who's doing the school or nursery run, maybe just get in there 5-10 minutes earlier, if and when you can.
Mm-hmm.
Put your headphones in, walk around the block, especially if the weather is nice. Soak up that vitamin D, get that fresh air, have that reset before you start that next chapter of your day of, you know, getting the kids home, maybe having that rush for tea or an after school club and then bedtime, etc., etc. So try and incorporate it into what you're already doing by, you know, music, podcast, audiobook, whatever that, you know, you find really useful. Colouring is another one that a lot of my clients like, and again, that could be something that we do with our children. It might be that we have our own colouring book on our own pens. However, it might be something that's done with our children. I think with that one, and also with the book as well, and maybe a couple of others, what my clients find really useful is to having a visual reminder of doing those things, especially when you're starting to build in that healthy habit. So having maybe a box in the lounge or wherever that actually has that stuff in. So it might have the colouring book or the book that you want to read or the pens or whatever. So it's together, and then actually you can pick it up and move it to a different room if you so wish, but also it acts as that visual reminder. Setting a timer on your phone might also do the same thing for you. Another thing is journaling. And you know, when I say that, people might be like, oh my gosh, that's like feels like some massive thing that I need to do. And actually, again, it doesn't need to be. You don't have to write reams and reams. You don't have to write in full sentences. You don't have to, you know, spend an hour each night reflecting on your entire day. What it could be is that you just take 2 minutes in the morning to set your intentions for the day. Like, today I want to achieve this. I'd like to feel like this. And then you also might want to reflect on the day before, like what am I really grateful for that happened yesterday? Or even, you know, what did I focus my energy on yesterday that, you know, was really helpful? Or what did I focus my energy on that was not particularly helpful? And what can I learn from that to bring into today? And that doesn't need to be any more than a couple of bullet points. Having, you know, a prompt, you know, a journaling book might help with that, because actually, you know, those prompts are there. Or you could even voice note it to yourself. You don't need a book, you don't need pen, you don't need paper. It could be a voice note, or it might be some notes in your phone. You know, the key is just to keep it really, really simple. And, you know, look at what you enjoyed, look at what is achievable, or even, you know, even if it feels really unachievable, like how can you potentially change it up and problem solve around that, the same as we would do for our clients, the same as we would do for our children. Problem solve and work out, actually, how can I make that work for me right now? And whether that's 2 minutes, 5 minutes, half an hour, whatever it looks like, but it has to work in a way for you that works for you right now.
And I think, you know, that is just so important about making it something that works for you rather than another thing you can feel guilty about not doing. Because I
Absolutely.
think that's what happens for a lot of people. And you mentioned journaling there, and 6 months ago, I would have been the one rolling my eyes and going, "Yeah, okay, here, you know, here we go." But actually, I've started doing it, and like that, it's really, really small. I got this book, and there's like this much space. I'm shown there's about, you could probably write about 2 or 3 lines per day, and that's enough for me. You know, it's just getting the thoughts out of my head, putting them down. It's usually around something that went well or I'm grateful for that day. And sometimes it's the I wish, you know, or this thing happened, you know, this negative thing. And for me, at the end of the day, that works for me because it means I get to kind of put the day away and move on for tomorrow. And then I know other people who like that. It's the morning time, it's the good time for them. So as you keep saying, you know, it's really about what works for
Mm-hmm.
you, and then getting practice,
Mm-hmm.
so putting those reminders there so that you start to build it up as a habit, nearly, that you're getting into a habit of doing these things. I know at first there's probably going to be loads of days that you'll miss and you go, oh, I wish, I forgot. But the more, as with anything, the more practice we get, the more likely we are to do these things by default.
Absolutely. And I think with that, if we do forget to do it, that doesn't mean we scrap it all together. Maybe it needs a tweak so that we can add it better into our day. Or maybe it's just life and life happens and sometimes things get forgotten and things get in our way of doing things. And so let's pick it up tomorrow or the day after, Even though I talk about all of this, I'm not perfect at it by any means.
Mm-hmm.
And we are only human and we can only do what we can do. So it's important to remember that and actually come at it from, kindness and compassion. The same as if our kid or our client was struggling, we wouldn't be hard on them. We would
Mm-hmm.
encourage them to try again tomorrow or try it in a different way. And so we need to do the same for us as well.
Absolutely. Listen, Emma, that was just so amazing to kind of talk that through with you. Is there anything else, anything that we missed that you wanted to cover? Is there any kind of final tips you want to give?
The only thing I would say, just to kind of, I guess, round up what we've said, is that if you are listening and you are wondering where to start and actually how this can, be a reality in your life, just start simple. Pick one thing, give yourself 5 minutes a day if you can on that, whatever that one thing is, and just keep practicing. And eventually it'll become a non-negotiable. And when you don't do it, you'll realize the impact that actually doing it really had. So just keep going with it, keep it simple, and just be kind and compassionate to yourself as you go through that process.
Absolutely. And if people want to find out more about what it is that you do, where could they best find you?
So you can find me in a couple of places. You can find me over on my website, which is emmabenyoncoaching.co.uk, or over on Facebook and Instagram at emmabenyon.coach, or I'm also over on the Self Care and Motherhood Edit podcast as well.
It's brilliant. Thank you very much. And all those links will be in the show notes. So it was absolutely lovely talking to you today. And thank you so much for all those tips. And I definitely need to revisit some of this myself. So thank you everyone for listening. And we will be back again next week.